Hi, this is Joe Bolen, and welcome to learning about visualbasic.net. In this video, we're going to look at deploying our application that we've created. In the last two videos, we've looked at the Xcopy method of deployment and also the click once method of deployment. Today, we're going to take a look at the Wix Toolset approach to deploying our application. It's a much more involved process. It does have a learning curve, and hopefully I'll get you started on that path to learn. But this is not a video that you're going to acquire all the knowledge you need to understand how to use Wix Toolset. But it'll get you started in the right direction. And so let's take a look at what we need to do to get Wix Toolset installed on our system and get it running and use it in our deployment program. First of all, we've got to go out to the website, and you'll see that the Wix Toolset website has all the information we need, and we can download not only the current version, stable version, but we also want to download the extensions related to it for our particular version of Visual Studio. In my case, I have the 2017 version installed on my system, so I'm going to download both those versions. Then I'm going to go and install Wix Toolset, and you'll see here the installation screen that Wix has, and you'll go ahead and install that to get it into your Visual Studio environment. And then also you want to go and download the Wix Setup Editor. This is something that I think makes it a lot easier than doing it traditionally, and you'll see as I use this in the application, it will make the task of getting all the different components necessary easier to install. So go down and download your Wix Toolset, get it on your system, install the application, and then I also recommend you download and install the Wix application, which creates the information we need for our application. Now, one other site that you will be going to perhaps is to get GUIDs, Global Unique Identifiers. And one site that I go to is simply the online GUIDs, and you can grab those as you need them during the process. This is what identifies each component in your setup as unique and maintains the ability to do version changes so that your system sees that there is the same components being involved or there's been a change. So these are the sites we'll be using throughout the process. Now let's go into working with our project, and let's actually begin the process of creating the project. Now I have Visual Studio up and running, so I'm going to do a create new project, and you'll see now I have installed a Wix Toolset as one of my template options in my environment. And I'm going to go over and go to the setup project for Wix, and I'm going to call this one, in this case, the VB is Fun Installer, because we're going to be installing our VB is Fun project that we created earlier. And I'm going to put this in a special folder. Let me browse. And I'm going to put my demo folder here. And there we go, VB is Fun Installer. There we go. So I've selected the setup project for Wix on that. There we go. And it brings it in, and the first thing we see highlighted is the products.wxs in our Solution Explorer, and you see it is an XML type of file, and initially there's very little there that you have, and this is our first process. Now, one thing we'll be doing is adding a grid here. We're going to change the name up here that we keyed in to VB is fun. We're going to also add the manufacturer's name. In this case, I'm going to use my fictitious company name, Bolen Computers. And that'll get our first line of information that comes in. Now, I'm going to get a grid in a little bit for this, but for now, we'll just let the asterisks be there. Now, this means that every time that I compile this program, this grid, which will be automatically generated, will be uniquely different. After I get things set, though, I do want to have a unique grid so that the system can see the differences as I upgrade and change things. Okay, let me also change the title down here. VB is fun. There we go. Now, I'm going to save that right now. Now I'm going to come up to my solution and actually bring in my project. So I'm going to right click and do an add, and I'm going to add an existing project. And now I'm going to go to my project and get the VB is fun project, bring it in, and now you'll see I have the project in there, and you'll see as you look at the resource area, there is the objects of this compiled program that we have. Now at this point, we're going to come down to the product Wix and do some more things, but the first thing I'm going to do is take care of adding a few more things to this part of the process. First of all, I want to add, besides the things I've changed, I'm going to add in here in the media template, I'm going to add a embed cab. And I'm going to take option of yes. And this will keep our project smaller, and everything will be embedded in our actual MSI program that we'll have in a minute. Also, I'm going to add a description to my install area here. And this is where I'll add description. And the description for this project is fun, date, and time display. There we go. I'm going to save at this point, make sure I don't lose anything. Now, we're going to add some more things later, but let's get this area down here below. This is going to be going into the program files folder. In this case, it'll be the program files x86 folder on that. If we wanted to put it in the 64 the bit folder, which is just program files, we type in 64 here. But this will be one that'll go into the program files x86 folder, and we've got everything there set. And we're going to add some more here in the directory, and this is actually the folder structure that we're going to be working with. And what I want to do in this spot in the folder structure is change this as well. And what I'm going to do is add another folder inside here. And that folder I'm going to add is the manufacturer's folder. Manufacturer folder. And that manufacturer is going to have a name. In this case, it's going to be using some information coming in. I'm going to bind to the property of manufacturer. And that manufacturer comes back up and references the manufacturer I have up here at the top. So we're pulling that information into this level. And at this point, I want it in this spot. And I'm going to take this tag, cut it out and bring it down one. There we go. Now I'm going to do a quick cleanup with a Control K, Control D. I'm going to take out these extra spots in here. And now we've got our folder structure that we're going to use for our installation. It'll go into the Programs Files x86 folder, and then it'll have our manufacturers folder, which will be Bolen computers, and then within it will actually be our particular VB is Fun installer. In this case, VB is Fun will come in place. So this creates the structure for our particular one. And I'm going to change this a little bit as well down here in the name, like I did up here. I'm going to grab this, copy it, and I'm going to put it in here and change this one, in this case, to product name. And product name, once again, will come back up and reference the actual name VB is Fun up here at the top on line 3. Okay, now that gets us pretty well set up with the structure. The next thing we want to do is get the components that relate to our particular program. In this case, it's going to pull in the information that we have in our actual program. And for that, this is where we use the Wix setup. I come up to the Tools area. You'll see I have a Wix setup editor that's been installed now with Wax. And it comes up and it sets up a nice little series of steps I go through, and so it already knows that I'm working with VB is Fun installer. It then asks me to hit the drop down on the root, and in this case I'm going to install this into the install folder section, and then I'm going to come down and I'm going to use VB is Fun on that. It gives me now the objects I need to work with, and you'll see that I only have 2 objects I need to deal with. I come over here and click on them, and it gets resolved. Now I'm going to minimize this down for a second so you can see what happened. Let me bring that down, and you'll see down here in the components area, this has been filled in for me automatically now. Each component ID comes in. Now imagine that you might have hundreds of objects in your main program. This becomes very taxing to do manually, and using the Wix setup editor makes this task a lot easier. So once you get this in place, it'll pull in the information, pulling it into the component ID area, and I'm done with that part of the process. Now I am going to do some changes here. I'm going to add a little bit to the end of these components that I'm working with, and one of them is the key path. So I'm going to add key path, and I'm going to make it yes, and I'm going to do that also down on the next one right here. So I've made those changes. Now I'm going to save everything I have at this point. And actually, at this point in time, I have everything I need to do an install. There will not be any shortcuts. There's no user interface. It will install it very quickly into the Programs x86 folder. So if I come over here to the Solution Explorer and click on our project and then hit Build, it will build, and it's done already. I'm going to highlight all the files in here, and you'll see that I have in here at this point in my bin folder area the MSI installer, so I could install it at this point. Now I'm going to change it from debug x86 over here on the release and change it to any CPU, and change it from debug to release on that. I don't want it in the debug area. I want an actual release on that. So at this point, I'm going to do another build. There we go. Build's done. And if I do a refresh now, we'll see that I have in the release folder my installer. Now I can go install this, but once again, at this point in time, all I have is a very quick way to install things. It will not have any user interface. It will not have any shortcuts on the desktop or in the program menu area. So these are some things we have to add differently. But this gets us started to begin with. The important things I started out with was I put in the manufacturer's name. In this case, I used Bolen Computers. I also made certain I had my name in here for the product. I also changed the embed cab to yes. Then I came down here and created my directory folder structure. I chose to have it in a sort of a three-tiered manner where I had the Bolen Computers folder, and then with underneath it, then I actually had the product. So that way, if I have a number of different programs that I'm delivering to a client, they'll all be in the same manufacturer's folder, but have different folders within it for each product that I install. Now, let's talk about making it a little bit more exciting, because right now it's just a plain Jane environment. So let me go over to the final setup of the product WXX extension, and we'll see the difference here. And I'll flip over to another program running. Same thing here, but now we'll see some changes. I've added the GUID to my product ID instead of an asterisk. Everything else up here in the top's the same, but now I've added a few other things. Now let's talk about each one that I've added. First of all, I've added my own icon, and all I did to do that was I dropped my icon in place over here. There you see the icon, and I coded in the information for that icon so it can use it in the installation. Also, I have my own end user license agreement as an RTF extension, and it's right here. And this one set up that I can bring in, and it'll display to the user as we process through the setup. In addition, I've modified the setup program so it has my own unique branding. And so I've got my two different objects here that show you the background of the setup process, and also the banner information that you can leave out if you'd like and use the default, but I'd like to make mine just a little bit more unique. Now, one thing I've added here is I've added the extension to the Wix UI extension area into my references. And the reason behind that is that I'm going to be adding in a actual dialogue for the setup. And so you'll see over here, as we scroll down, that there are a number of different types of interfaces for using Wix Toolset. And you'll need to go out and research that. The minimal one is the easiest one, and it has the less amount of options to it. It strictly shows you the EULA license that you might have, and then proceeds to install to the default areas that you set up. But I'd like to give the user the option to change their location, and so I'm going to be using the installed directory version of the setup program. And so down below here, I've made active those different XML commands to have that. I've told it to install this into the default install folder that's been defined. One other thing I've added is I've added down here at the bottom a nice little thank you message as it concludes the setup process to inform somebody that, hey, I really appreciate that you've installed my product. Now we have a couple other areas now I've added as well. We started out with just the product components area in our group here, but now I've added two other ones, an application shortcut and an application desktop shortcut. These IDs then will reference, we'll see down here in a minute, for putting those shortcuts on the desktop and in our menu. The next thing I want to do is I want to check this particular program that I have, my BB is Fun program, requires that it has a dot framework of 4.6.2 or later installed. And so if I come down through here, I'm doing a check of a condition. And basically, I'm looking to see if I do have the .NET Framework 4.6.2 installed or later. If it doesn't meet this condition, this program will stop and not go any further. It'll give a message to the user that you need to install the application. And you see here the message I put in on that so that the person knows they need to get that installed. Now, I'm going to show you in a little bit that I've also included a bootstrapper project into this to make certain that I do have this in place before we get into this actual part of the setup. But this alone, I want to check and make certain is a true condition. Now let's come back and look at our framework. We've got this part still the same. Now I'm going to add the information for the start menu folder on that. And so I put this information in here, including Bolen computers. And also I put in the information for the desktop location where I'm going to be putting the desktop shortcut. So these are two additions I've added in. Then we come on down, and there once again is the group that we came in using the Wix setup editor, adding the key path information. And now we see the parts for the area where we have to define how we want to have the start menu. And here we see the information, all necessary to create the shortcut. A little bit more involved than using the click once method. Here we have to actually go in and define some things. And so we're putting in information for the shortcut itself on that, including the icon that we're going to be using that I defined up earlier. We're telling it the target directory, the things that go into the shortcuts properties. Then upon removing of the application, we want to pull that out so the shortcut goes away. Also, we want to register into the registry the information that we've installed the shortcut. Once again, this would pull out upon us removing this out of there. So this is all necessary to describe the startup menu folder information for our shortcut. Likewise, we have to define the desktop shortcut. Very similar. And once again, each GUID, I've gone out and got a unique GUID for this. And here, once again, we see the shortcuts description. And in this case, we also see the registry value, but in this case, we don't have a folder that we're removing out of the setup. So it's a little shorter area, but this defines the actual desktop shortcut that we're going to be creating. And that creates our installer. And we could run this one. In fact, I've already compiled that, and I'll show you the compiled version on that. I'll come over here, refresh, and then show you all the files in there. And you'll see the compiled version in the bin folder is my VB is Fun installer.msi. And we can click on that, and it'll install with a nice graphical activity to do that. Now, one of the things I want to bring to your attention, though, is that we had the requirement of the .NET Framework 4.6.2 for this program. So how do we solve that one? Well, what we do is we add another project, a bootstrap project. What I did was I went out on my solution, went to Add New, and I went back to our Wix area and added the bootstrap project and called that one VB is Fun Setup and brought that in. And I'm going to pass it and take you to that spot. And you'll see it now in my project. I also added a reference to VB is Fun installer pointing back up to the actual installer. And then I added a reference to the WixNet FX extension. And this will take care of the .NET part of the application. I also dropped in a logo to make it a little bit more unique. In this case, it's a 50 by 50 pixel logo. And then the main meat of this one is the bundle, this object right here. And this is very similar. The difference here is that I have to add in this line of code up above for this particular one. Also, I have to put in the manufacturer's name again for this one. And I modified the actual bootstrapper interface. I'm using the hyperlink license, and basically what I'm doing is bypassing showing another EULA by making the license URL location blank. And so all we'll see is the icon during this part instead of actually seeing a license by going with the hyperlink license instead of a hard-coded license in here. So this is a little modification to make the user experience of the setup go a little bit differently. Then we begin the chain process, and this is just where we chain everything together. And all I need to do to get the .NET Framework 4.6.2 installed is that, and that does it all. So that's a very simple way to get it in. We could also use the web version if I wanted the user to go out on the web and get it instead of having it included in my package. But in this case, I want it included in my package. It'll make it a little bit larger, but it'll be there for setup if I put it on a CD or USB flash drive. Then we call the actual package we're installing. And in this case, we're pointing back to the installer that we had up here. So we're going back and looking at this installer that we had, and it's pulling that in. I'm telling it to go ahead and display the internal UI that's part of that installer. And I'm also saying that if it doesn't install, that's critical and therefore roll back the situation. And once again, I come over to this one and I go to the setup one, and we now have our objects up here of our fun, and it's referencing back to the installer. It has our WixNet FX extension in there as well as one other reference. And then all I have to do is run a build here. And at that point, it's going to create, when it's done, it'll create the information we need, and I'll show you that we now have in our bin area a VB is Fun Setup exe. And so this one basically installs the .NET framework that we needed. Then it calls and chains to our actual installer up above and brings that in, which then brings in our program that we started out with up at the top, which is our VB is Fun program. So there's all the things we need. At that point, all I need to do is go to this one. I'm going to right click on it, open folder in File Explorer, go up to the bin area, the release folder, and there my VB is Fun. I'm going to copy this one for this case, and I'm going to put it on our desktop. So I'm going to go to the desktop and paste this here. And you'll see that I have this all ready to go. I'm going to double click on it. You also see that it shows the information about the shortcut and its size. It's a little bit large because we're including the .NET framework with it. I'm going to double click on it. Now, since my computer already has this level, you won't see much action through that particular part of the program. But if you did not have that on a target computer, you'd see a little bit more taking place. So let's double click. And there is our first part. This is the bootstrapper part to start it out. This is my branding of the icon. There's our name coming in. I hit install. At this point, I'm getting the information, and now we're getting initialized. Takes a few minutes here. It's also going to go through my checking of antivirus, so that's a process going on as well. So once that gets initialized, now we're coming to the actual part of the VBS Fun Installer part of the program. Here's my customized interface on this. I hit next. Here's my EULA. You can see it through here. And my branding as well is taking place. Hit next. Now it gives the user the option of where to install it. In my case, I have an identical folder located on the U drive. So I'm going to change this to the U drive, or I could hit the button and drill down to where I would want to install it. But I have the exact same name over on the U drive, so I'm going to just change the directory, hit next, and then it's ready to proceed, and I hit install. There we go, and there's my little message. Thank you for installing this Bolen product at the end that I added. And I hit finish, and there's our going back to the bootstrapper, and I'm ready to close out. Now you'll notice that I have a VBS Fun icon on the desktop on that with the information that I put in, as well as my start menu has it in the recently added area, and because I put it in a structure, it's under Bolen Computers, and there's my VBS Fun shortcut out of my menu. So I'm going to click on this, and there's our program running, and you can see it's today is Thursday, August 17th, 2017 in the afternoon. So our program has been installed, and to uninstall it, of course, that is just to go down to your settings, go to your apps, and there you key in your name of the program and that. And all I have to do is click to uninstall, and it'll do the same thing as any other kind of uninstall. It'll also give us a chance to repair if we need to, and it'll roll out everything that we installed. So there we go. We've got our program up and running. We're got it so we can distribute it to anybody else by providing them with this nice MSI VBS Fun program that has the bootstrapper to get our .NET framework in place. It also has the actual install with the shortcuts for this program, as well as the program itself. So we've got all that included in our little bundle of information, but as I said, it does take a little bit to get set up. This is the actual area for the bootstrapper on that, and here is the area that we did to get all the stuff set up related to this project. Once again, you're going to have to take a little bit of time to learn how to do this. This is not a I'm going to whip it out very quickly. You have to learn how to use the Wix Toolset. But let me also add, the Wix Toolset has a lot of variety to it and options that are available, especially if you're looking at installing a SQL database in your system. This can do that very easily. It can run installation scripts to put in your database, your tables, and your data, as well as your program that you might have interfacing with your database. So this gives you a lot of control, a lot of things you can do in your setup. We've only examined a very simple one. If you're starting out, before you worry about a lot of the branding that I did, just start out and work with the minimal interface. It'll make it easier for you, and you'll see how easy it is to do. And then you can start trying out some of the other interfaces that are available. You'll have to go out to the Wix Toolset documentation to learn a lot of things, but by looking at this program and getting a little idea of what I did, you'll get a sense of how you can make the Wix toolset work for you to install very professionally programs that you have developed for others. So I'd like you to get your hands dirty in the code, as I always say at the end of my videos. Try out the Wix toolset. Work and learn in stages. This is something that'll take a couple of days or maybe longer to learn how to use. And I even recommend that you go out and buy a couple of books, maybe at least one book, on how to use the Wix tool set. There's a couple of nice books out there. Now I've taken advantage of reading those too to become more comfortable with what's involved in understanding how to use the Wix tool set. So it is a very powerful and, let me add, free installation package. It gives you a lot of control. And I want to emphasize that because this is what makes it very nice, especially as your projects are more complex and you have databases and installation scripts that you have to run to make everything install for your client. So take a look at this one. It's a learning curve, that's to be said, but it's worth the effort. And I highly recommend you go out there and install the Wix toolset. Also install the Wix editor setup for you to make it easier to get all the objects of your program into the code, and give it a try. So get your hands dirty in the code and take care.